it is my pleasure to welcome Reverend Dr. Judith Loftus back to our pulpit. She, as many of you may remember, she is an ordained priest in the United Catholic Church. She holds a master's degree in social work, religious education, and Spanish. And she has served as a social worker for over 30 years. She's currently the manager of counseling at Midwestern University in Glendale. And she does an animal-assisted therapy. So, Roz, you need to connect that. And she also serves as a chaplain to students and to a police department. So, welcome back, Judith.
Whoever said there's a lot of tall people here is absolutely right. I'm not one of them. I was pretty convinced that you were located at 51st Avenue in Choya. And I was a little miffed at Valerie for not telling me that you had moved. And then I realized, honey, it's all on you. And then I'm riding along Choya between 51st and 59th, and I get behind the slowest van. And it's like God is trying to teach me something this morning, and I'm not a willing student. And it's human, and also because I was so late, I have a voice disorder that when I have any trigger of stress as far as I'm going to be late and they're going to hate me, then my voice is a little bit out of whack. So it's not your hearing, it truly is. It's a neurological disorder, and it truly is in my voice. So, here we go. We are all human beings, and we are all seekers. And I would be willing to bet that we have all walked many paths to get where we are today. And some of those paths were happy paths, and some of those paths may have been very disappointing paths. But we kept on seeking. And I think sometimes it's not so necessarily important what we find as much as that we keep looking. What may have made sense to me in my 20s did not make sense to me in my 40s, and definitely does not make sense to me in my 60s. As a matter of fact, my level of impatience with people who are so dedicated to Facebook. I show my age at work every day with my coworkers who are at least some of them 20 years younger than I am. I've challenged my underlying beliefs in faith, in myself, in how I perceive the world, in my work, in social work, and I continue to do that to this day. My basic values have remained and grown and changed, but they're still mine, and hopefully now they have more of an adult spin rather than a childish view of life. I hope with more compassion and understanding, I begin to understand myself, but that I also begin to understand those around me, those who either share my views, share my faith tradition, share my ethnic group, share my cultural group, and those who do not. When I was ordained, I wanted to do something in the community that was volunteer work. And I came up with a lot of ideas, but I really wasn't sold on any of the ideas. So basically, I wanted something that had interpersonal connections, that fit my values, that I felt like I could contribute to, but that I would also enjoy. I didn't want to volunteer for something and dread going every time I was supposed to be there. I also didn't know who I wanted to volunteer with. And so I started to do some soul searching. And who did, and now this sounds a little arrogant, and I understand that, but somebody's going to benefit from my volunteer time, therefore the wonderfulness of myself. And so who did I want to share myself with, and who did I want to learn from? So with that thought, I decided it was a brilliant idea to apply to be a police department chaplain. Now, what did I know of police departments, you ask? That much. I knew they carried guns, I knew they had uniforms, I knew they had neat cars with lights and sirens, and I knew they had a badge. That was pretty much the extent of what I knew about the police department. And so after fingerprinting and background checks and a polygraph, they called and they said that I had been accepted as a police chaplain. So what's my first thought? Why did I think this was a good idea? That was the absolute first thought. Not, I'm so grateful for the opportunity, but why did I think this was a good idea? I don't know anything about the workings of a police department. Well, 8 years later, every time I get into the police car, or every time I walk through the station house, I learn something new. Some things I learn that I really admire and appreciate, and some things I learn that I don't necessarily agree with, but I am able to be with them. As a licensed clinical social worker, I have to deal with the ups and downs of human nature every day. And working in a medical school environment, I have to deal with the notion, not my notion, but the notion of perfection and how to live out that perfection every day. And because people are so, in my environment, are so perfection oriented, you can imagine the anxiety level is very high. And so not only do I have to learn to deal with my own anxiety, but I have to learn to deal with the anxiety in the community around me. As a police chaplain, I did not expect to face the challenge that I faced. And it was within myself. It wasn't interpersonal, it wasn't riding lights and sirens, it wasn't being around people who have rifles in the trunk. It was within myself. And the struggle was, am I enough? What is enough? I had been trained in chaplaincy. I knew how to be a chaplain. I'm a better chaplain than I am a pastor. But the fact of the matter is, I had never learned what was enough. What is it? As a social worker, enough is basically till you can't walk straight and think straight. You give and give and give until there's nothing left. And that's true of a lot of professions. As a parent, you can have that same tendency. And now, as a police chaplain, I show up. I don't have any idea when enough is enough or what enough is. I mean, do they want me to show up every day at 8 o'clock? Do they want me to go home early and let them do their paperwork? What is enough? I had never been able to identify. So then I started to think, well, what do I think is enough? Forget what they think is enough. I don't even know what enough is, because it was always, as a female Catholic child, there was never enough. And as you know, growing up, growing older, there was never enough. There were always more demands, and I really did not know what was enough. It sounds kind of not necessarily stupid, but definitely part of our culture. Our culture does not support the concept of enough. One of the things that drives me crazy is when you go into a place like hamburger and fries. Well, do you want to supersize that? Well, do you want a Coke? Well, a Coke this big is not going to do it. You need a Coke that's about that big, you know, with a straw and free refills. So not only can I get a Coke that big, I can get a Coke with free refills. I went out into the store the other day, my daughter was visiting, and we went out for a hamburger, and I said I didn't want any fries. And the guy behind the counter said to me, everybody wants fries. What do you mean you don't want fries? You don't want to supersize them? I said, I'm probably the only person I know, I don't even like French fries. So why would I want to supersize French fries? But that's the mentality of the culture. They're not enough. Hamburger and fries, not enough. We want to supersize it. A grocery store is not enough. We want a super center. Thanksgiving. Think of the beautiful holiday of Thanksgiving. It's shortened so we can all run to Walmart and stand in line for the bargains, or so that we can count the hours until Cyber Monday. And coffee isn't a cup, it's a venti. And so it's like, how do we even learn when is enough when we're bombarded with, we never earn enough, we never give enough? How do we know? So little by little, what I decided to do is nobody can tell me, I can get a lot of counsel from people, but nobody can tell me what is enough for me. And I'm not talking about money, I'm not talking about food, I'm not talking about doubling my volunteer hours with the police department. What I'm talking about is basically my own self, so that I know when is enough enough. as a social worker, especially when I was doing a hospice social worker, you would burn the candle at every end and then be on call. And so in that environment, I really never understood when enough was enough, because more was always expected. So you could be really depleted of your own self and then be expected to dig a little deeper and find some more. And one of the things that I came to eventually, and at my age, it's a good understanding, it took me long enough to get here, is that I am enough. I can be enough. But in order for me to even meet the baseline of enough, I have to take time for me. So when I'm counseling medical students, we talk in terms of mind, body, spirit. And one day I sat and I thought, well, I asked them, what are you doing for your mind? Well, they're in medical school. What are you doing for your body? Well, some of them nothing, some of them run, whatever. What are you doing for your spirit? And that's usually when the conversation breaks down. But the fact of the matter is, if we don't replenish ourselves, we have nothing left to give. Whether that's parents, whether that's attorneys, whether that's doctors, whether that's somebody that's working in a department store, a librarian, I don't care who you are. But we have got to take time. And for me, what does that mean? That's what I really had to figure. What does that mean? Does that mean I watch more Hallmark Channel movies? Which I love, by the way. I never said that out loud. But I do, I love Hallmark Channel. I could write them, you know, it's like, I really could write them, but I just love watching them. So what does it mean? It means that I have to recharge my batteries, and I have to be allowed in the cultural environment that I'm in to do that. And so sometimes we have to carve out that time for ourselves. Sometimes we have to insist that we get that time. 1 week at work, I'm salaried, so I don't get overtime. 1 week at work, I worked so much overtime that I was able to take 2 days off the following week as overtime. Now, that's more than enough. And that's what I mean when I say we have to know what is enough, what isn't the expectation of enough, but what is enough for me. And then if I say, well, I have to renew myself, then what does that mean to me? So little by little, I have come to terms with what is enough, what does it mean to me, and what might it mean to other people as well. Because the environment I work in, and I imagine the environments that a lot of you work in, more is prized, less is not. And so it is definitely, it's give enough, but then give a little more, and give a little more, and give a little more. And so it's easy to burn the candle at every end you can find, working a full-time job for me as a police chaplain and trying to spend time with family. Because a lot of times what I realized is I'm spending more time in the front seat of a police car than I am sitting on the couch next to my husband. Now something's wrong with that picture as well. Now if I even begin to ask myself what is enough, I think in terms of how am I deepening my faith in the divine, my faith in myself, my faith in those I love, so I can continue on the path of being present to others. I want people to be present to me. I want to be present to them as well. I've learned, and I will continue, I hope, to be reminded that I'm consciously aware of the presence of the divine in my own life, and not to be present to myself, and not taking care of my physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being is not going to deepen my relationship with my higher power. If anything, it's only going to lessen it. I cannot be present to everyone else, and whether I am enough or not will never matter if I'm not all there to begin with. I learned to accept that sometimes I'm not enough. Sometimes I am enough. Sometimes I don't know if I'm enough. But that I am a work in progress, willing to nurture others, but also willing to take time to nurture myself. Have a good week.
Thank you so much, Judith. So, Okay, please stand as now as you're willing and able and join in the singing of our closing hymn, We Would Be One, number 318. Please join in reading the West Valley Unitarian Universalist Church's mission statement. And we'll read it together. We agree to provide a safe place to celebrate diversity, provide inspiration for living better lives, foster social and environmental justice, and compassionately support each other in our spiritual searches. Okay, again, thank you to Reverend Dr. Judith Loftus. Judith, thank you so much for coming. It was wonderful you gave us a wonderful talk. Thank you. And Joe, thank Morgan our thanks. Okay, thank you very much for all of you for coming this morning, and please join us for fellowship hour outside. And we'll now extinguish the chalice, and Joe will give the posting.